The massive alien ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, its sleek silver hull reflecting the distant sunlight. Inside the vessel's command center, Ambassador Red stared at the holographic display with all four of his eyes widening in disbelief. What he saw defied everything he knew about warfare and engineering. "This can't be right," he whispered to his science officer. "Run the scans again." The officer's fingers danced across the control panel, but the results remained the same. The red planet ahead of them, Mars, according to their intelligence, was no longer just a planet. It had been transformed into something that should have been impossible. Massive engine arrays protruded from its southern pole, while the northern hemisphere bristled with weapon systems larger than most cities. The entire equator had been converted into a series of massive hangar bays, each one capable of launching thousands of ships. The surface was covered in a lattice of armor plating that made the planet shine like a metallic orange jewel. "By the Council's wisdom," Red muttered, "they've turned their entire planet into a battle station." The human diplomatic vessel approaching them seemed tiny in comparison, barely 2 kilometers long. It was practically a shuttle compared to the Council's flagship. Yet even this small human ship was armed with weapons that made Red's tactical officer nervous. "Incoming transmission from the human vessel," announced the communications officer. Red straightened his ceremonial robes. This was supposed to be a routine first contact with a newly discovered spacefaring race. The Council had detected their primitive radio signals just a century ago. How had they advanced so quickly? The holographic screen flickered to life, showing a human male in a blue uniform. "Greetings, Council representatives. I'm Ambassador Walker of the Earth Defense Force. Welcome to the Sol system." Red tried to keep his voice steady. "Greetings, Ambassador. I must ask about the installation we're detecting around Mars." Walker smiled proudly. "Ah yes, the Mars Defense Platform. Impressive, isn't it? It's our first successful planetary conversion. We have smaller installations in the asteroid belt, of course, but nothing quite matches Mars." First successful conversion. Red felt his heart skip a beat. Were they planning to convert more planets? "Ambassador Walker," Red said carefully, "in all the history of the Council, spanning thousands of species and millions of years, no one has ever weaponized an entire planet. The energy requirements alone should make it impossible." Walker looked genuinely surprised. "Really? We solved the power problem by tapping into Mars' core. Once we figured out how to contain and direct planetary magnetic fields, the rest was just engineering." Just engineering. Red fought to keep his diplomatic composure. The casual way the human discussed this world-shattering achievement was almost as terrifying as the achievement itself. "May I ask why your species felt the need to build such a formidable installation?" "Defense, naturally," Walker replied. "We detected your signals decades ago, along with several other alien transmissions. Without knowing who was out there, we had to be prepared for anything. Better safe than sorry, right?" Red's translator had trouble with the last phrase, but the meaning was clear enough. These humans had built a weapon that could probably destroy the entire Council fleet as a precaution. Looking at his tactical display again, Red noticed something even more disturbing. The energy readings from Mars suggested that only about 30% of its systems were currently active. What would this monster be capable of at full power? "I see," Red said, his voice slightly trembling. "Ambassador Walker, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I must inform you that the presence of such a weapon will complicate your species' potential membership in our organization." Walker's smile faded slightly. "With all due respect, Ambassador, we didn't build it to impress the Council. We built it to protect Earth. I hope that won't be necessary, but we're prepared if it is." The implied threat hung in the silence between the two ships, while behind them, Mars continued its silent orbit, its weapon systems tracking every movement of the Council vessel. First contact had officially gone wrong. 3 days after the first contact, the Council ship remained in orbit around Earth. The tension had only grown worse. Ambassador Walker stood at the window of the orbital meeting station, watching the massive alien vessel hover like a silver sword above his home planet. Behind him, Ambassador Red and 5 other council representatives sat around the conference table. None of them had touched the water provided for the meeting. They were too busy staring at the holographic display showing detailed scans of Mars. "This is unacceptable," said Blue, the military advisor. Unlike Red's 4 eyes, Blue had 6, and all of them glowed with barely contained anger. The weapon systems on this installation could destroy half a solar system. Walker turned from the window. "You keep calling it a weapon. Mars is a defense platform. There's a difference." "A difference in words only," growled Green, the council's chief scientist. His scaled skin flickered with patches of worried colors. "Our analysis shows your defense platform has enough firepower to vaporize our capital world. The council cannot allow such a threat to exist." Walker sat down, fighting to keep his patience. For 3 days, they'd had the same argument. The council saw Mars as a threat. Earth saw it as protection. Neither side was willing to back down. "Let me be clear," Walker said. "We detected your signals 50 years ago. We also picked up transmissions from 3 other alien civilizations. Some of them didn't sound friendly. What were we supposed to do? Sit helpless and hope for the best?" Red's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of frustration. "You could have built normal ships, like every other species. The Council's largest vessels are only 3 kilometers long, and that's more than enough for defense." "Is it?" Walker pulled up his own hologram, showing historical records. "According to the data you shared, 6 different species have been completely wiped out in Council space during the last century alone. Their normal ships didn't seem to help them much." The Council members shifted uncomfortably. Walker pressed his advantage. "Earth has been through too many wars. We learned the hard way that the best way to prevent conflict is to be too strong to attack. Mars ensures that." "And what happens?" Blue asked softly, "when you decide to build more? When you start converting other planets into these machines? How long until humans control every strategic point in the galaxy?" "We don't want to control anything," Walker insisted. "We just want to be left alone. Mars is about survival, not conquest." Red stood up suddenly. His normally blue skin had turned pale gray, a sign that he had reached a decision. "The Council has discussed this matter in private. We are prepared to offer Earth membership in the Galactic Council, with all the protection that provides, on one condition: decommission Mars." Walker stared at him. "You want us to dismantle our only major defense? You would have the protection of 10,000 worlds," Red countered. "The combined Council fleet. The same fleet that lost 6 member worlds in a century." Walker shook his head. "I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen." "Then you leave us no choice." Red's voice turned cold. "Earth has 1 standard month to begin dismantling the Mars installation. If you refuse, you will be declared a Class 1 threat to galactic peace. No trade, no diplomacy, no contact with any Council world." Walker stood slowly. In the window's reflection, he could see Earth spinning peacefully below. Somewhere up there, Mars hung in space, its massive weapons ready but silent. They had built it hoping they would never need it. "Ambassador Red," he said quietly, "I want to be very clear about something. Earth would love to join the galactic community. We want to trade, to share knowledge, to make friends. But we will not give up our right to defend ourselves. Not now, not ever." "Then you choose isolation," Red declared. "No," Walker corrected him. "You choose conflict. I just hope you remember this conversation when you realize your mistake." As the Council members filed out, Walker sent a coded message to Earth Command. "Begin activating the asteroid belt defenses. I don't think our new friends are planning to stay friendly for long." The warning had been delivered. Now the only question was who would make the first move. The Council didn't wait a month. They attacked after just 3 days. 2,000 ships dropped out of hyperspace at once, their weapons already charged. The Council's entire First Fleet had come to destroy what they saw as the greatest threat to galactic peace. On Earth's moon base, General White watched the tactical display with a grim smile. "Right on time," he said to his staff, just like Ambassador Walker predicted. The Council fleet spread out in an attack formation that would have overwhelmed any normal defense system. Their ships moved with perfect coordination, the result of thousands of years of military tradition. But they weren't attacking a normal defense system. "They still haven't spotted our asteroids," reported Captain Stone from his command chair. The captain's hidden base was inside what looked like a simple rock in the asteroid belt. But this rock, like dozens of others, was actually a heavily armed battle station. "Let them get closer," ordered White. "Wait for Mars to draw their attention." On the Council's command ship, Admiral Blue watched with satisfaction as his fleet approached Earth's orbit. The humans' great weapon, Mars, remained silent. Perhaps they had been too shocked by the sudden attack to power it up in time. "Primary target in range," reported his tactical officer. "Mars's defense systems are still at minimal power." Blue allowed himself a smile. "Begin the attack. Show these humans what real warships can do." The Council fleet opened fire. 10,000 energy beams struck Mars simultaneously, enough firepower to crack a small moon. The red planet's surface lit up like a star. When the light faded, Mars was completely undamaged. "Impossible," Blue shouted. "Fire again." But before his fleet could launch a second attack, Mars responded. Its surface seemed to shift, revealing row after row of weapon ports. Energy readings jumped off the scale. And then, from the asteroid belt, came the real surprise. "Multiple contacts," screamed Blue's sensor officer. "The asteroids. They're moving." Dozens of what the Council had thought were simple space rocks suddenly came to life. Hidden engines flared, and weapon systems powered up. The Council fleet found itself caught between Mars and an approaching wall of armed asteroids. "They're in our blind spots," shouted the tactical officer. "They know all our weak points." Blue realized the truth too late. The humans hadn't been unprepared. They had been waiting. Every detail of the Council's attack formation had played right into their hands. Mars fired first. A single shot from its main cannon vaporized 30 Council ships. The asteroid bases opened fire next, their weapons perfectly coordinated to hit the fleet's most vulnerable points. "Pull back," Blue ordered. "All ships, emergency retreat." But retreat wasn't as simple as he hoped. More asteroids appeared behind the fleet, cutting off their escape route. The humans had turned the entire solar system into a trap. On the moon base, General White watched the Council fleet's destruction with no joy. "Send the message," he ordered. Throughout the Council fleet, every ship's communication system received the same transmission. Ambassador Walker's voice came through loud and clear. "This is what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. We gave you every chance for peace. Remember that. Half your fleet can leave now. The other half stays here as scrap metal. Your choice." Admiral Blue looked at his tactical display. Half his fleet was already destroyed. The surviving ships were trapped between Mars and the asteroid bases, with nowhere to run. "Stand down," he ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Power down weapons." As the Council ships surrendered one by one, Captain Stone sent a private message to General White. "Should we tell them about Jupiter?" "Not yet," White replied. "Let's hope we never have to. Mars and the asteroids were warning enough. If they're smart, they won't make us show them what a gas giant can do when we convert it." The battle was over in less than an hour. Humanity's first interstellar war had ended before it really began, and the galaxy had learned an important lesson. Never mistake preparation for aggression, and never, ever underestimate humans. A week after the first battle, the Council made their final desperate move. Not just the First Fleet this time. They sent everything they had. 10,000 ships filled Earth's solar system, surrounding Mars in a sphere of overwhelming firepower. They really don't learn, do they? General White watched from the Lunar Command Center as the massive alien armada took position. This time, Admiral Gold led the Council forces, their most experienced commander. On the Council's new flagship, Admiral Gold studied the tactical display with all 8 of his eyes. Unlike his predecessor, he wouldn't underestimate the humans. Status of Mars, he asked his sensor officer. Active but not powering weapons. They appear to be channeling massive energy into something else. We can't identify the system. Gold nodded slowly. The humans had surprised them once with the asteroid bases. He wouldn't fall for another trap. His fleet was positioned to counter any hidden forces, any surprise attacks. But the humans had something else in mind entirely. In Lunar Command, General White received an encrypted message. Mars is ready. He smiled. Send word to Admiral Gold. Tell him to watch carefully. He's about to see why we're the only ones who build ships this big. On the Council flagship, Gold received the transmission with suspicion. What game are they playing? He wondered aloud. Then Mars began to move. Not the usual orbital movement. The entire planet shifted. Blue energy rippled across its surface as massive engines, bigger than most cities, ignited all at once. Impossible, Gold whispered. They can't be. But they were. Mars, an entire planet converted into a warship, was preparing to jump to faster than light speed. All ships, open fire. Gold ordered. Stop them before. The red planet vanished in a flash of light that briefly outshone the sun. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Gold's fleet hung in space, weapons still pointed at where Mars had been. Then Mars reappeared, behind the Council fleet. How? Gold's tactical officer screamed. A planet can't make an FTL jump. The mass calculations alone ruled. Target locked, came a human transmission. Your ships are surrounded. Again. Gold turned to his rear display. Mars hung there like an angry red eye, its weapon ports open, its guns aimed at the heart of his fleet. The planet had performed a perfect faster-than-light tactical maneuver, something that should have been physically impossible. Now, came General White's voice. Let's talk about why you're the only species that never tried to build planet-sized ships. It's impossible. Gold shouted back. The power requirements, the gravitational stresses, no civilization has ever. Wrong. White interrupted. No civilization ever succeeded. There's a difference. You all tried it the same way. Treating a planet like a big ship. We did it differently. We didn't fight the planet's nature. We used it. Through the flagship's windows, Gold watched as Mars's surface shifted again. Layers of armor plating moved like scales on a living creature, adjusting the planet's mass distribution in ways his scientists had claimed were impossible. Your choice, Admiral. White continued. Surrender, or we show you what else Mars can do. And this time, we won't let half your fleet go home. Gold looked at his tactical display one last time. His 10,000 ships, the combined might of the entire Council, had been outmaneuvered by a single planet. We surrender, he said quietly. As the Council ships powered down their weapons, Gold asked one final question. Why? Why go to such lengths just for defense? Because, White replied, we learned long ago that the best way to keep peace is to make war unthinkable. Mars isn't just a weapon, it's a promise. Attack us, and you lose. Simple as that. The Mars maneuver, as it came to be known, changed galactic warfare forever. But more importantly, it showed the Council something they have forgotten. Sometimes the impossible just needs to be approached differently. And humans, it seemed, were very good at doing things differently. 2 days after the Council fleet's surrender, a team of human scientists boarded the captured flagship. Their mission wasn't to study alien weapons or defenses. Instead, they wanted to understand why no other species had succeeded in building planetary-scale ships. Dr. Evans led the research team. As she accessed the Council's scientific database, her eyes widened. "General White needs to see this," she said to her team. In the flagship's main conference room, now converted into a temporary research center, General White listened as Evans explained her findings. "It's fascinating," she said, pointing to the holographic display. "Every advanced species in the Council tried to build planet-sized ships. Every single one failed, but they all failed the same way." White studied the ancient diagrams floating in the air. "Show me." "They all treated planets like giant spaceships," Evans explained. "They tried to build engines and systems the same way they built their regular ships, just bigger. That's why they failed." From the corner of the room, Admiral Gold watched with all 8 eyes. The Council had allowed him to stay as an observer, hoping to understand where they had gone wrong. "And we did it differently?" White asked. Evans nodded eagerly. "Completely differently. Instead of fighting against a planet's natural forces, we used them. Mars's core isn't just a power source, it's the ship's brain. The magnetic field isn't just for protection, it's part of the control system." She pulled up images of Mars's internal structure. "Look here. Every other species tried to power their planetary ships from the outside in. We did it from the inside out. The planet's own core powers everything." Gold stepped forward, his curiosity overcoming his caution. "But the gravitational stresses during faster-than-light travel are handled by the planet itself," Evans finished. "Mars's liquid core acts as a natural stabilizer. We just had to learn how to work with it instead of against it." She showed more diagrams, these ones displaying Mars' unique design. "The armor plating isn't just protection, it's a series of gravitational field manipulators. They work with the planet's natural gravity, not against it. That's why we can make FTL jumps that your scientists thought were impossible." White turned to Gold. "Your people never considered this approach." The alien admiral's skin changed color, a sign of embarrassment. "We were too focused on what we knew worked with smaller ships. The idea of using a planet's natural systems, it never occurred to us." "That's the human advantage," Evans said proudly. "We don't just think outside the box. Sometimes we forget there was a box in the first place." She brought up one final display. The Council's failed attempts at planetary engineering over the centuries. Every species hit the same wall because they all followed the same path. We found a different path. "And Jupiter?" Gold asked quietly. "The rumors about what you're doing with the gas giant." White smiled. "Let's just say Mars was our first successful conversion. It won't be our last." Gold's color shifted again, this time showing fear. "Your species, you could build an entire fleet of planet-sized ships." "We could," White agreed. "But we won't. One Mars is enough for defense. More would look like we're preparing for conquest." Evans shut down the holographic display. "The real question is, what happens now? This knowledge changes everything about space warfare." "No," White corrected her. "It changes everything about space peace. Mars exists, so we never have to use it. That's the real human advantage. We're creative enough to build the ultimate weapon, and wise enough to use it only for defense." Gold looked out the conference room window at Mars, floating majestically in space. Perhaps the Council has much to learn from humans after all." "We all have much to learn," White said. "The only difference is, humans never stop trying to learn new things." As the meeting ended, Evans began packing up her research materials. On her tablet, diagrams of Jupiter's conversion project remained open, showing how humans were once again doing the impossible, not because they were stronger or smarter than other species, but because they had never learned to believe in the word impossible. Ambassador Red stood alone in the Earth Orbital Station's observation deck, watching Mars glide across the star-filled sky. After 2 major defeats, the Council had sent him back, not to make threats this time, but to understand. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Ambassador Walker joined him at the window. "Even with all the modifications, it still looks like the red planet we grew up watching through telescopes." Red's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. When I first saw what you'd done to Mars, I thought it was an act of destruction. Now I realize it was an act of creation." Walker smiled. Funny how perspective changes everything. Behind them, the door opened. General White entered, carrying a data tablet. "The Council's historical records make for interesting reading," he said. "Now we know why you were so afraid of us." Red turned from the window. "Yes, our fears. They came from our own history. Every time a species developed superior technology, they became conquerors. Every single time. Except us," Walker pointed out. "Except you." Red gestured at Mars. "You built the most powerful weapon in galactic history, and you use it to avoid war. We didn't think that was possible." White set down his tablet. "Tell us about the Destroyer Wars," he said quietly. Red's skin paled. "You found those records 3,000 years ago," White continued. "A species called the Destroyers built massive warships. Not as big as Mars, but bigger than anything else at the time. They almost conquered the galaxy." "They killed billions," Red whispered. 17 species went extinct. The Council barely survived. After that, we banned any research into planetary-scale engineering. We thought we were preventing another war." Walker leaned against the window. "Instead, you prevented the development of the best defense against war." "Yes." Red's voice carried centuries of regret. "We were so focused on stopping another threat that we didn't consider alternatives. When we saw Mars, we saw another destroyer fleet in the making." "But that's not what you see now?" White asked. Red shook his head. "No. Now I see what fear cost us. 3,000 years of scientific progress, lost because we were too afraid to think differently." Through the window, they watched as Mars tested its defensive systems. Energy fields rippled across its surface like waves on a red ocean. "The Council's leadership is meeting right now," Red said. "They're voting on a new proposal. We want to learn from you." Walker raised an eyebrow. "Learn what?" "Everything. How you think, how you approach problems, how you can build something so powerful and not be tempted to misuse it." White smiled. "The answer to that last one is simple. We built Mars because we never want to fight another war. Having the biggest gun in the galaxy means nothing if you actually have to use it." "That's what we finally understand," Red said. "Your Mars project wasn't about building a weapon. It was about building peace." He turned to face both humans. "The Council was wrong about humanity. We came here to stop what we thought was a threat to galactic peace. Instead, we found its greatest defender." Walker extended his hand, a human gesture of friendship that Red had learned about. "Then let's start over. Not as potential enemies, but as partners." Red took the offered hand carefully. "Partners in what?" "In building something better than weapons," White answered. "Mars proved we could engineer planets. Imagine what we could accomplish if we worked together to use that knowledge for exploration and discovery instead of war." Through the window, Mars completed its defensive test. Its surface shifted back to its normal appearance, once again looking like the simple red planet it had been for billions of years. 3,000 years ago," Red said quietly, "the destroyers showed us what superior technology could do in the hands of conquerors. Today, humanity has shown us what it can do in the hands of defenders." Walker smiled. "Then let's show the galaxy what it can do in the hands of friends." Understanding had finally been reached, not through force or fear, but through the simple realization that the greatest power isn't the ability to win wars. It's the wisdom to prevent them. 1 year after the Mars incident, the great shipyards of Jupiter buzzed with activity. But they weren't building weapons anymore. General White, now retired, stood on the observation deck of the new Jupiter construction platform. Beside him, Ambassador Red and Dr. Evans watched as thousands of workers from 100 different species worked together on something unprecedented. "Hard to believe," White said, "that just a year ago we were ready to fight each other. Now look at us. Below them, The massive form of Europa, Jupiter's ice moon, was being transformed. Like Mars before it, the moon was changing. But this time, it wasn't becoming a weapon. The first interstellar exploration vessel built by a joint human council team, Evans said proudly. And we're doing it the human way, using the moon's natural properties instead of fighting against them. Red moved closer to the window. Europa's ice shell and liquid ocean make it perfect for long-term space travel. The water provides radiation shielding and can be used for both fuel and life support. And the best part, Evans added, is that it's big enough to carry colonists from every council species. A true city in space. The observation deck's display showed the project's status. Europa's transformation was already 40% complete. Its icy surface now housed vast habitation zones, research facilities, and engineering sections. The Sol Accords changed everything, Red said quietly. Not just the technology sharing, but the whole way the Council thinks about space travel. White nodded. Fear holds back progress. Once you stopped being afraid of us, you started seeing the possibilities. Speaking of possibilities, Evans interrupted, pointing to another display. The gas giant conversion project is proceeding ahead of schedule. Through the window, they could see Jupiter's massive form. The giant planet was slowly being transformed into something that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. A permanent base of operations for the combined Human Council space program. Your species continues to amaze us, Red said. You're converting the largest planet in your solar system not into a weapon, but into a home for peaceful exploration. That was always the plan, White replied. Mars was just step one, proving we could convert a planet. Jupiter is the real goal, a place where all species can work together to reach the stars. Below them, a team of alien engineers worked alongside human technicians, installing the massive engines that would eventually move Europa out of Jupiter's orbit. The ice moon would become humanity's first true starship, not a weapon like Mars, but a vessel of exploration. The Council votes tomorrow on the Jupiter Initiative, Red announced, on whether to commit resources to building more exploration vessels like Europa. How do you think they'll vote? Evans asked. Red's 4 eyes crinkled in what humans had learned was a smile. After seeing what we've accomplished here, unanimously in favor. The age of building weapons is over. The age of building bridges has begun. A bright flash from Jupiter caught their attention. Another conversion team had successfully activated a new power collection system in the gas giant's atmosphere. Soon, Jupiter would power not just Europa, but all future construction projects in the solar system. You know what the best part is? White said, watching the teams work. Mars hasn't fired a single shot since the day we showed it could move. The most powerful weapon ever built has become the galaxy's most effective peacekeeper. Because everyone knows it's there, Red agreed. But more importantly, everyone knows how humans choose to use it. Evans checked her tablet. Europa will be ready for its first test flight in 6 months. The Council is already talking about converting more moons, building a whole fleet of exploration ships. Not bad, White smiled, for a species that was considered a galactic threat just a year ago. As they watched, Europa's new engines glowed briefly, a systems test. Soon, the converted moon would carry representatives from every known species into the unknown, seeking new worlds and new discoveries. The era of planet-sized warships was over. The era of planet-sized exploration vessels had begun. And it had all started because humans chose to build their ultimate weapon not for war, but for peace. A new age of galactic cooperation had dawned, proving that sometimes the greatest victories come not from winning battles, but from making them unnecessary.